Okay, we're online.
I'll plug in.
Like that picture.
Great, thank you, Terry. So welcome to, we lost the screen. Why does it do that?
Unplug it and plug it back in again.
We're good? Okay, welcome to today's curriculum committee meeting for the board. We can do the talking part while Terry works on the presentation part, right? Okay, so we are calling the meeting to order today at 3:34 while we work through some technical difficulties. The agenda was posted in advance. We are live streaming it and we'll work on the presentation skills. So I'll ask the board members to introduce themselves.
Diane Potter.
Megan Carlson.
Jeff Hanley.
And Alyssa, Tracy, and Tony V are on their way. There's been a little glitches, so they will be here shortly. And I am Angela Hardy, the Director of Curriculum. So today's agenda, just because I'm not able to present it this second, is actually reflecting on the work of Lynn Lyons. So I'll provide an update and then share some outcomes with you. And then we'll move into a new opportunity called Opportunity Culture that I really want to share with you and talk through. I think it's best done here, and then we'll do an overview with the full board. But since you're about teaching and learning, I thought we would start here. And an adjournment, I tried to keep it really focused this time. And so that there'll be time for questions if you have them. Okay, so I cannot seem to present at the moment, so we'll just, for this one, I'll talk it through. As you know, the United Way of Kennebec Valley provided us a grant, or awarded us a grant, because we had to apply for it, of $20,000 for the year. And that grant covers work with families and staff and students around managing anxiety and worry. Lynn Lyons is a national expert in this. She is not only a published author specific to this, but she also is a practitioner. So she's a licensed clinical practitioner, and she still has private practice. She's in her 33rd year or something like that of private practice, where this is what she focuses on. And she also goes and helps schools, a lot of schools.
What's her name again, please?
Lynn Lyons. She's actually from New Hampshire, so she lives nearby. She has a website, it's just lynnlyons.com. And so she did, the grant is covering her time and her presentations across 3 different groups, and on some ongoing feedback and with the groups, and copies of her books so that we can do ongoing study and apply the practices from the books into our classroom and school communities, so that this is not a one and done. This is a year-long study. Thank you, Terry. And we had a family engagement night on Thursday in the boardroom Thursday night in the little theater at the high school. We had some attendance. It wasn't as high as I had hoped, but it was a decent amount of turnout. And what was really fascinating is that pretty much every person, I'll just keep handing this to you, every person who participated left feeling like they got something out of it and had a lot of positive feedback. Part of that is because she's authentic, she's real, she doesn't talk like she's up on some ivory tower. She does this work every single day with real life people, kids and adults, and she's kind of funny.
Yes.
So she's able to strip down all of the all the extras related to the topic of anxiety and worry and get it down to its core. Like, what is it about? And she was really clear with us that while it is important to know if people have a diagnosis a special type of anxiety. Let me think of some. Generalized anxiety, she said, is like the equal opportunity anxiety. You worry about everything and anything and everything. Or social anxiety, you worry about interacting with people, right? There's lots of different kinds. And she says what that does is just tells us what you worry about, but the process of worry and anxiety is all the same no matter the type. And she said a lot of people get caught up in the type and they're not working on the process. And so then they never interrupt and disrupt this anxiety and they can't manage it because you just move from one type to another. Or, people do that, right? One thing or another. And it just keeps accelerating. And basically she talks about anxiety being this thing that just grows and grows and grows. And that it can become absolutely controlling. And she likes to name it, this was her kind of a little controversial, but she says it's like a cult leader. You bring it out and it is this thing that if you follow its rules and making sure that you're always certain and always comfortable, then you're fine. But the moment uncertainty or discomfort enter your life, which as humans enters all the time, then this thing gets angry and it basically activates, it makes a worry story and it activates your amygdala, which then pumps up your whole system with fight or flight chemicals. And then she says you're off to the races. And then you can't think logically and you can't slow it down. And so she kind of went through what is the worry cycle and how do you disrupt it and interrupt it and how do you gain control? You're always going to worry still in your life. People just do. But how do you gain control over that and manage it? So she spent time with with families and community members on Thursday night. And then Friday, we had all of our staff attend from 8 to 10 in the gym for 2 hours. And thank you, Terry. How do I exit out of that? I did do an exit ticket, which we are currently processing. And I wanted to show you it's while it's not done, I went through every single exit ticket that our staff completed and kind of sorted them all to at least get a general sense myself. And now Stephanie is helping me enter the data into a spreadsheet for sure, so that I know for sure that it's accurate. But what I noticed is what she entered so far is actually about the numbers or the figures that we were getting back when I looked at it by hand. So I'll share it with you, but I can follow up with a more detailed and accurate representation. But if I show you this just quickly, let's see if I can make it a little bigger. So we have way more than 56 responses. The stack is quite large, but I did sort through all the responses on the 1 to 5 scale about how helpful the session was to staff. And as you can see, there were no ones in the whole chart, the whole packet I went through, which is the least helpful, right? Strongly disagree. There were a couple 2s and a couple 3s in the pack I went through. So far, she's recorded 1 of each. And the rest were all in the 4s and 5s. And this looks about accurate. And so this one says 95% or 96 actually % of the people found that they strongly agreed that this was helpful. Just to give you some context, this is the most positive I've ever gotten from any full-scale professional development session. And in fact, a lot of people, there were 2 qualitative features. And a lot of people said this was the best learning they've had in their entire career. And then they would name the number of decades they've been in the career.
So Facebook posts reinforcing that. Exactly.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, see, I don't have a lot of Facebook connections
So
around
just
here.
this was the best professional development, and like you just said, exactly, and all the reasons, not just a sentence, some of them wrote paragraphs. about
Wow.
it. Yeah, really impactful for
So-
staff.
So everyone in the district took this
Yeah,
survey?
yeah, including custodial staff.
I was gonna say all the employees.
Yep. And they could choose to put their name or not on the form because that allows us to give them contact hours. I asked them this question. I asked what town they reside in. That is not for to connect it to the person by any means, but it helps with the United Way data that they need to know how many people they impacted in Kennebec Valley. So that's just why that information. I asked them to share a takeaway from the session, so those are getting collected now, and then I'm gonna code them
dear.
for responses.
That first one right out of the gate.
Oh, dear. Oh.
Yeah, I know, there was a lot of, there was.
They were
It was
honest,
really, people
right?
were really honest. They said
So-
things like, you know, this was helpful to me personally, this was helpful to me professionally, right? There were multiple layers that they were gaining access. There's a lot of people wrote, you know, thinking about their next, you know, what they want to do next. A lot of them said they'd like to make sure that we get this message into the hands of students. And how can we do that while we're learning? It's really hard, you know, when you don't feel expert at something to like get there. And so we're gonna come up with some strategies for that. After the 2-hour presentation, we then had all of the social workers, school counselors, special education staff, including ed techs, teachers and ed techs, administrators and nurses, I think that's everyone, myself, a lot of central office staff, administrators, into the high school library from 10:30 to 1:30 for additional training, a more specialized, specific training. Because we're the ones on the front lines. And that was really focusing on what are the, how do you design, what are appropriate accommodations? Or what aren't they? How do you actually do this on the daily basis with students and their parents and such? And so that was what happened on Thursday and Friday. I got a lot, I don't usually get a lot of feedback after these things, like personally, because I do offer these exit tickets and stuff, but I was actually really surprised. I got a fair amount of emails from staff members over the weekend, just as they were listening to podcasts and reflecting.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I
There
got
you go,
it.
thank you. And that's kind of unusual for me, for people to take the time to do that. So I do think it was really valuable. We will have ongoing learning, as I said. We have a couple of her books. People got to opt in. That's good for adult choice, right? They could choose the adult one, which is the anxiety audit, which is really adult-centric focused. And because once you get good at that, then it's easier to connect with students. And the other one is Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents, and it's really focused on strategies. That's where a bulk of our staff actually selected the text. And then there's a children's book that goes along with that one. Not really for like pre-K, K1, it's really for grades 2 and up. That we also purchased with grant funds to use alongside the staff's learning. So I'm really curious to see, after a year of study and practiced implementation, how we're feeling about this and what our next steps are.
I think it sounds, I don't know, I remember when I was a guidance counselor, so many times teachers felt inadequate how to deal with some mental health issues. And I understand that, and this does give you a book and a children's book and everything, but a lot of times the general perspective, you don't have to do more than you're teaching, but you change your way of looking at an issue. It's not trying to make you become a social worker. It's just to have a different way of looking at it. That is the beginning part, and maybe a few tricks in your toolbox to use too.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We are not asking our teachers to become therapists, right? This is not their role, but anxiety is sometimes it comes up in themselves, but most often, what we're trying to do is understand, like, what are we seeing happening here? This child is feeling a little out of control. What's the process, not what's the thing that triggered the child? That is helpful to know and be aware of, but what's really the process, and how do we support that child in learning about the process and helping the child interrupt the cycle of worry and come to a place where they can manage it and become independent in that over time. And that's powerful. it's like, if we can have that and they're, our kids are entering high school with those skills, that's just, that will avoid a lot of other challenges that we're facing. One of the, Pat is actually writing a letter to the community about this, and she's sharing the podcast link. It's free, they're all free. And one of the ones she just dropped is on school avoidance, which gets to our chronic absentee issue. And a lot of students who struggle with anxiety are actually trying to avoid all the things that cause them worry and distress. And so they're also avoiding school. And so often our intuition is, if that thing's causing me distress and worry, I'm going to avoid it, or I'm going to help so-and-so avoid it. We're going to make sure all the things are not in our pathway. And she says, in fact, that actually accelerates the intensity of the anxiety instead of helping people demystify the anxiety and manage it. And so that was powerful. And that was probably one of the biggest takeaways. It was like, oh, okay. We accommodate for so many other disorders, but for anxiety, you actually need to learn how to manage through it without going into the deep end.
Yes,
That was the
also
key.
accommodating.
Yes, well, and she said it's temporary accommodations,
it's a
whereas
different kind
other
of
ones,
accommodations.
yes,
Sure.
you release them over time as they become skilled, as
Yep.
we hope for all things, but especially with this particular situation.
I just have a final thought and comment that I wanted to share, and I've said it before, so I don't want you to think I'm saying it to you personally, right? But for my time here, we seem to struggle with communicating clearly to the community and the
Yes.
schools. So I would have appreciated if we did an email blast and a Facebook page and a text blast so that folks could know, because we didn't have enough community representation besides us and staff. Because it was really only on Facebook, and somehow I found a link to it. I don't even know where. It may have been through Healthy Capital. I don't know. But I feel like folks didn't know it was happening. And there was a lot going on, which is always going to be a thing. But if we can just be consistent in messaging, like if Pat's letter could go out all those ways, that'd be amazing. Then
Yeah.
folks can be pointed to it, right? That was just one personal comment. And then I heard a few other people like, oh, I didn't even know it was a thing, right? Or why would I go? I didn't realize it was a community event, right? Those kind of comments were like, oh, darn, we missed our mark a little there. But now at least, yeah, we have good staff that I know are a good population in the communities, and that's all good. So, but I just say that as if we can do all the things next time, that'd be awesome, just to make sure everybody gets the message, however they get it, right?
Yeah, Patricia Buckwelton from Healthy Communities of the Capital Area, who helped a lot with this.
Yeah.
Also, that was her feedback as well.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah.
And I'll own that actually, because I feel like.
It's a lot, there's a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
it has to sit on someone's shoulders.
Sure.
And how do you assign that, right? And so that's, it's unfortunate. I think I am used to our more traditional approaches
Sure.
and not
Yep.
blasting. So that's good feedback. And it is something I'm really disappointed that we didn't have a higher turnout. And we had a lot of competing things all of a sudden
Totally.
that happened that same night,
Yeah.
which was inevitable, but
Yeah.
challenging.
But it was very worthwhile, yeah, for all the reasons you said and people have shared already. I took like pages of notes. I was writing feverishly, like, oh my gosh, yeah.
It was good.
So,
It was good.
yeah.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Yeah,
And thanks
thank
for your honesty.
Yes.
Anything else on that one? Okay. I want to share something, a new opportunity for us. Oops, hang on. I just have to change my setting here so that it shows you the right thing. There we go. And I want to put it into context for you, and I actually would really like a discussion around this. Okay, Terry, are you able to put it on the screen for them? Okay, well, I'll get it set up then. Okay, first and foremost, I do not like the name of this, what we call initiatives, new thing. But I don't get to control that, so just bear with me on that, okay? So part of our strategic plan process, we don't have a plan yet, we have a process that we've been adhering to. And what came from the first part of the process through those listening sessions across all our stakeholder groups are 4 themes. And one of those themes is educator sustainability. That is under the, when you dig into the data, the data we collected from these folks around educator sustainability, what does it really mean? Can we keep people in our district? We've always been able to, but can we continue to moving forward? Feels really different these days, not in our district, but in our just climate generally across education everywhere. People are really struggling and it's showing up in schools. And then we're struggling as adults work doing that. So can we keep people? There are so many ongoing new rules and laws about how we do business. It sometimes feels overwhelming to staff. And we never remember to take away any of the old ones. We just keep adding, at the state level or our level or anywhere, right? And so that gets, it feels like a constant burden, right? So there's that going on. There's other opportunities out there for educators now. You can be a trained teacher and not actually work in a public school system. There's like lots of opportunities for you that are different. So one is, can we retain the people we hire that we want to retain and they want to be with us? And that includes administrators as well. It's really hard on a system to have high turnover in administration. It's hard on a system to have it at the teacher and a tech level. It is particularly hard at the administrative level. Think of like that person sort of sets the tone and changes the rules, and your order of business changes if they change. So we have a lot going on that's been good about the role of the educator and the administrator in our district, and a lot we're proud of because we've been able to have this longevity for so many people. But there's a couple other factors coming into play. We don't have, persistently since I've been here, I've noticed we don't really have like a career ladder. So you can come in as an Ed Tech 3, you can move into a teaching position because now the state has a lot of resources to enable people to do that at low cost, to earn their teaching certificate. And if we find them qualified, we can hire them. So that's one ladder. But then once you get in that teacher role, the real next ladder, besides like department chair, which only happens in grades 6 through 12, is administrator. And we want that for some people, for sure. But there's just not enough, there's only so many administrator roles. And you certainly don't want to be adding all kinds of administrator roles. That's not very cost effective. But there's lots of opportunity for leadership. And right now that opportunity is informal. And what we're trying to figure out is what kind of opportunities exist in public schooling that allows an increase in the student achievement, strong job satisfaction, the ability to highlight someone who has incredibly strong instructional skills and has proven that they can help students learn well, and help build up our new teaching population. It takes a while to really, even if you had a 4.0 in your GPA in your undergrad and you come to be a teacher, it takes 3 years at least for the rubber to really hit the road and feel really confident. And how we kind of accelerate that a little bit too. So we know in this district that teachers want leadership opportunities. We know they want to have a strong impact on student learning. We know we need to get over this hump that we've had pre-COVID forever about this like achievement level. We reach a certain status and we kind of plateau for a while. Then we went down because of COVID. Now we're coming back up and we need to come up with systems that are going to allow it to go up a little further, right? And not hit a plateau again. So the Davis Family Foundation, which is a Maine-based foundation, has decided to put some money behind an endeavor that really gets at this issue. They've been in the education field for a long time, funding it at least. They are not direct funding schools. They've decided to work with Great Schools Partnership, which is a nonprofit, and Public Impact, which is also a nonprofit. Public Impact is out of North Carolina, one of the Carolinas, I'm pretty sure it's North Carolina. Both of those organizations have been working at school system improvement as partners in school system improvement for 15 or more years, more in public impacts case. Again, because they're nonprofit, they're not out to sell a product, right? And they're meant to coach and support and be the public, the big thinkers and engage in research. So they've invited MSAD11, and the board did approve this already, but now we're getting down to brass tacks. So I really want to have you on the ground with this. So public impact for years in other locations in the country, including Florida, Texas, Ohio, DC, it doesn't matter what kind of state it is, whether it's a more conservative leaning state or a progressive leaning state, they've worked in all those states, okay, with great success. And their goal is to improve learning outcomes for students, specifically for students who historically have not been well met. In our district, that's mostly our students with special needs, identified special needs. That's where we historically just cannot seem to move the mark as well as we should. And we're working on it, been actively working on it. But in their cases, low income students, which, we certainly have a percentage of students of color. So they have a series of models, and these models, what they're meant to do is ensure students have access to excellent teaching and they call it small group tutoring, but small group instruction. We believe in that already. We've already set up systems to support that, but we're struggling, especially under the small group instruction model, to manage it through leadership and collaboration. That great teachers advance by moving up, but not out of the classroom. So it's a model, but let me just go back to the TPEG days, TIF days. What do you call that? The new evaluation system when we were under a grant a bazillion years ago. Anyway, where teachers earn money by earning certain scores, that's not what this is. I want to be really clear. That's not like you get extra pay because your scores are high and you don't because your scores are not high. That's not the point of this at all. But it's really looking at the instructional model that could exist in a school system that might be different than one teacher, 16 kids, one teacher, 16 kids, one teacher, and then the middle and high school, which is a little different, okay? There's a way to allow for daily support from these strong teachers to other teachers with eyes on students. So you know how we have a strong instructional coaching model? And that's student-centered. It's not fixing the teachers. It's working directly with teachers in their co-planning, and it's looking at students and really thinking about that context and what are all the factors that are figuring into the issue. It's sort of that approach. And then at the administrator level, the principals drive change through a distributed leadership. Right now, a lot lies on the individual principal. And this way you start having a shared leadership role. Now, we do have some shared leadership at the middle school and the high school, but a lot of it still lands on the management side rather than the instructional side. So we want to really tap into the instructional side. They have multiple models throughout this process called opportunity culture. However, we don't have to adhere to any one, because you have to take into account your own context and figure out based on your context what is possible, okay? So they give you models as examples, but not as something you need to replicate. You can create your own. And then, again, they have special names because everyone has special names for everything, but I'm going to ignore the special names and talk about the purpose. So you have teachers with high growth, a record of high growth, strong instructional practice, strong planning, collaboration, data analysis, all of that. They have more flexibility to observe and give feedback, coach, co-teach across a small group of classrooms. So they kind of have a unit. And then there's there's teachers and then what they call reach associates, those are our ed techs. But those advanced paraprofessionals, they have specialty skills too, right? And so it's really trying to think about what we've been doing under the model that we employed with Nate Levinson's work in district management group is finding those who have the strongest skill sets and ensuring they have the greatest access to students. And then those who we want to boost their skill sets, find out what they're most interested in improving and provide that level of training. Because what happens in education, like let's say a special ed teacher, you become a Jack or Jane of all trades. And then you can't actually like have a deep knowledge of any one thing. And how are you supposed to then all of a sudden help these children who are significant needs? You really need to be able to get expert or something and really help those kids in a more focused way. And we need to align people in the right places. The key with this is we're not increasing the goal on all of this is to not increase the budget. They've been able to do this in lots of other districts, lots of different sizes, large and small, where you're reconsidering the instructional model, the roles you currently have, the budgeting you currently have, and you're considering how to repurpose that in a way that impacts student learning the most. And when districts have been able to do that, they have evidence that there is significant growth in student learning. So, and just here's an example, right? So in this case, it's 20 to 40% growth. And then they highlight all their research. But basically every year they're doing this, students are gaining a year and a half of learning instead of a year of learning. And then over time that compounds, right? And it grows.
Would that be effective in the special needs students, do you think?
Yeah, it's inclusive. This data is inclusive of them. I specifically asked that question in my follow-up too, Jeff. So from their starting point, right, to where it went, but that's big growth. So the process, just so you're aware, is 2 years. The planning is 2 years. So we're not looking at like ripping the Band-Aid off and trying something new really fast. The first year is really at the sort of administrative level, bringing some stuff here, talking with the director of special services and assistant, director of curriculum, superintendent, operations, director of technology, like sort of the lead folks, and then weaving in the school-based building leaders over time across the year. Looking at the goal, crafting very clearly written goals for our district, and then analyzing career ladders and staffing, sustainable funding. We're going to want to start thinking about this years in advance. How does this not increase our budget? The recruitment and selection process, hiring, how this aligns with our evaluation, and how to communicate and schedule, right? Because you know that when you pull on one piece of a system, teaching and learning, it's gonna, because it's system, it's interconnected and interdependent, you're going to pull on all the other parts of your system. So you pull here, it's gonna impact budgeting. It's going, one way or the other. You have to be intentional. It's going to impact our operations and our buildings. It's going to impact our leadership and our hiring and our building schedules and all that sort of stuff. So they're taking that into account and ensuring that it's really thorough and it's a systems change initiative and not an initiative that we're just dropping in the middle of school and not taking into account what do we have to let go of in order to do this well, right? We want to have those really difficult conversations. And then there's this very distinct roadmap of how it goes across hours and all that. But what I want to show you is this. So, and then in year 2, you actually bring teachers into the conversation. So they're helping with the planning process in the second year, right? So it's grounded in practice and not just, again, this administrative theory of action. And then in the summer, at the end of the second year is when you start the full training so that you can slowly roll the initiative out into the third year. And you've budgeted for that and planned for that, right? So this is how it's worked in other systems, large and small. There's a lot of support in Maine for us to think about this. There are other districts in Maine engaged in this process, so there would be a cohort. Yeah, so there's one district that's already signed in, I'll tell you that, and then there's a few other districts that I won't say their names yet because they haven't signed on, but they're in the process. The goal is for this to have representation across different areas of the state, so that it's not a central Maine initiative or southern Maine initiative or, that kind of thing. So the board did support our exploration of this here and RSU2. RSU2 is very, very different from us.
Yes.
And we don't want to become RSU2 and RSU2 doesn't want to become MSAD11. So we've worked with the facilitators of this to ensure that, yes, we can be critical thought partners of each other, but we are not designing each other's system. We're doing our own work. And then other districts, there's a district in Western Maine, a district in Southern Maine, and a district in Northern Maine that's looking at, starting to connect with their board and get into that, are you committed process. So they're a few months behind us, but there's purpose and support and intent, and that's what we're waiting to see how that plays out. We don't have to wait for them to sign on, we can start, but that is sort of the look of it, so that there's lots of configurations and then we can see how different people play it out based on their context. So that's what this is. And again, it's intended to be approaching and looking at that educator sustainability piece. It is not intended to make more work for teachers or more work for principals. It's actually intended to buy us time to very intentionally and strategically, while running a school, hit pause on the side and say, hit pause for a few hours each time we work through the planning process and say, how might this be? How might we do this? You're not afforded 2 years of planning ever in public education. So this is something that's buying us time, basically.
Have you taken an opinion poll of the teachers that will be affected? Have you gone system-wide? Try to give all of them a little overview of this and ask their opinion of it?
No, not of this specific initiative yet. We looked, so I went into the teacher, I did the whole strategic plan listening thing, and then I went into just the ones that were coded educators. And I listened to what they had to say and went through all the online Live Voices network and went through and heard their stories to try to ensure, does this align or not align? If it doesn't align with the things that they said they wanted to see, then we weren't going to go there. We weren't even going to bring it to your attention. It does align. It's potentially biased because it's one person looking to see alignment, right? So that's certainly a problem. But we tend to not hide things from our staff. So, Pat's pretty direct with staff. And so it would be something that we have talked through with the building principals. How would this impact your teachers? How do you feel like it would help or hurt them? Do you feel like they'd be supportive of it? I know that I work with teachers routinely, and I know at the elementary level, they're really hungry for some level of kind of shared leadership. And we have a lot of phenomenal educators doing really good work. And I think there's a way to recognize that through a potential shift in the way we do business. We're probably, although I can't really say that, I was going to say we're probably not known as being that innovative, but in fact, actually we are. The district is getting more and more accolades for that because the teachers are all in. They're trying out really new, interesting things.
I'm not an educator, so I'm going to ask the dumb questions.
There's not a dumb question. It's important to ask these questions.
To me, this sounds like it would be a pretty much top to bottom overhaul of the teaching method. Is it dramatic as I think it is, the change that you're asking about?
I don't think it's dramatic in the teaching and learning side of it. I actually think it is a little dramatic in the organizational structure. And the reason I think those are different is because, one, that's how I operate in my brain, but also because teaching and learning, like what's best for students and how they learn, not going to shift no matter what your organizational structure is. Whether or not we can employ it is the issue, right? And right now, we have a lot of teachers employing that pretty well. And we have a lot of teachers saying, we need more staff here, or I just need another set of eyes, or I just need this coach in my room to help me think through this problem. And we only have so many coaches, right? And I can't even seem to hire a second math coach. And so we're burning the math coach out. We have teachers not getting the math support they're actually asking for, which is a really good problem to have. They're asking for the support because they trust and know she's a partner with them, that the results come from the partnership with the coach. So if we can't keep hiring coaches, which is a teacher's salary plus 20 days for each per diem per person that we hire, are there ways we can sustainably create space for strong knowledge and teaching and learning to more immediately impact classroom spaces in a job embedded way, right? They don't have to videotape and wait for someone to come and watch the videotape, or they don't have to wait their turn in line for the math or the literacy coach to be available. Is there something that can help? It doesn't mean we're necessarily eliminating coaching, but we may think of strategically, maybe we wouldn't be burning out a math coach, right? Because there's a more strategic way now for that person to work with someone. So the organizational, in my mind, for the elementary, the organizational design is pretty significantly different. But I don't know for sure because we haven't gone through the process. In middle and high school, I don't know yet. I really think the way we use time and space for some of our department or team leaders, rethinking that and or sharing that differently with time and space we already have could eventually actually meet this objective.
I mean, he's got a question.
After Tony, I guess.
I just wanted to maybe draw, so I have very limited, but I was aware that there was a change at the middle school. I'm gonna pick on them for a second. A few years ago, they went to looping for 7th and 8th grade, right?
Or they stopped doing looping.
Did they stop doing that? Yeah.
2 years ago, yeah.
So, yeah, how did that, so just as an example, right, so we chose not to do that, that's fine. How did that transition work? Because I know at the time it was like, right, it was a shift from just 6, 7, 8, it was a shift to try something. How did that work for the group?
So when they started looping, that was well before my time, and they did it for a couple of reasons. Reported to me. One, build strong social emotional connections, or community connections, or knowing your students well connections, and knowing your teacher well connections, and carrying them forth across 2 years. So you reduce that transition time the second year in the 8th grade. So you can really just jump into the learning. The second objective was to so one is social emotional, the other one was academic, right? If I have these kids for 2 years, I can just dive really deep. The problem that happened is I do think probably the knowing each other well connection was probably made and fostered and did well. Few kids where that didn't work, whether they had flexibility or not to move them to another team. Whether they had flexibility and chose to follow through with moving them to another team so that they could have a more effective second year is something I'm not entirely sure about. On the academic lens, what ended up happening, and this was after a couple of years of looking at ongoing data from years prior, is 7th grade curriculum stretched into 8th grade. Because we had this belief that if we got it right, if we really, really got it right and laid the foundation, then we'd be fine in 8th grade. But what happened is we took all of 7th grade and part of 8th grade to do 7th grade curriculum to get it right. And then we shortchanged 8th grade curriculum, and then students didn't have what they needed to move forward. And so we tried some different things to sort of shift that pattern, and it wasn't helpful. The other thing was that the teachers learned is that they actually had to know 2 years of curriculum well. And the problem is you get into 1 year and you do well and you're like, next year I would do this instead. And then it would be 2 years before they taught it again, and then they'd forget, and then they'd do it again. They'd be like, oh, I said I was going to try this again differently, because then you're so into the next year's curriculum, right? And then you're kind of circling back through. And we asked that of no one else, right?
Right, it was
To
just
do that.
specific there, yeah.
So the data we kept flatlining in seventh, it was just this like, we'd rise, we'd flatline, and then we'd split off in eighth grade. And so it proved that it didn't help. But we didn't know that until we actually hit pause and said, why do we loop? What is it intended to do? And the problem, of course, is we didn't have data on the emotional connection side of things, like the trusted adult and the trusting the students thing. Would we have made the same decision to stop looping if we did? And then maybe we would have changed some different instructional decisions also. But in the end, we've stopped, we've gone to grade level teams. People are finding a lot more clarity about their grade level work as a result of doing it this way. So there's drawbacks and benefits to both practices.
So we've made that kind of teaching style adjustments. We've kind of used the data to shift back out of that. This seems like a little more aligned on the team side versus the looping that was a unique sort of
Yeah, and it
process
still
that-
ended up being sort of one teacher
Yeah.
looping through 2 years instead of like a full team
But
approach.
we've definitely made adjustments and made adjustments back, and people can navigate that. And I don't know if there's something to contrast, compare or contrast with this versus say looping, like what worked and what didn't. Can we use that if we're gonna?
And that's actually a good point, that in this design process, that might be something we actually should go back to. Like, what else have we done in the district that has or has not worked in people's memory? Or, my memory is 5 years, but I have
To
files and
4.
files from other people, which would be much longer, right? And so I think there is some evidence to say, here's, especially since we keep people for a long time, or we have historically.
Yeah.
We are getting a lot of retirements coming up. And so it's, if we get good teachers in this district to fill those retirement spots, I want to keep them as long as we can keep them. I don't want them to jump ship because they're like, oh, I can't handle it here,
Another thing, right.
So that's part of this too.
Well, that's why I asked about taking a system-wide poll. I mean, you don't want to start this and then get a lot of resistance that you
True.
didn't realize was going to be there.
Yep.
But I don't know how you really would
So
do that.
that's a good point, Jeff. We have talked with the association. We have really, really good relationship with both the Ed Tech and the Teachers Association. We're not getting resistance through the leadership at the moment, but we probably need a deeper conversation now that it's starting to get to the place of like, here's concept. Conceptually, it was okay. So, and we have they do a lot of work with us to say like, well, maybe they poll, right? And so it's not coming from the administrator seeing the results, and then they aggregate the data and they share it back with us. So teachers can really speak more freely, and then that collection of data can come back to Pat and I, and we kind of process it with the administrative team. Now that we're a little bit further we haven't actually started designing, right? But a little further along, have a little bit more of the details, trying to figure out and I'm meeting with the lead facilitators for these organizations tomorrow morning. So maybe talking with them about how can I strip this down into like, what are the essential components and language so that I can talk more with the association about it and they can think about what's our best way of communicating with staff more impactfully about this and making sure they're in the loop. They recognize this is work that we hope to achieve if they can see the value in it. And we can opt out if we get 6 months down this and we're like, whoo, we can opt out.
Too much.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to prolong this. I just had some.
No, I think that's the very best question. It's the only question.
And it's making me think a little bit about that communication. We had that conversation already about Lynn Lyons. Let's make sure our communication is really strong and clear. I feel like historically we've had some really good positive communication between administrators and teachers and other staff members. I think we've always struggled with our external communication, and we keep trying different ways. And I think we'll keep trying. So I think that's a really key point coming out of this particular agenda item, is really thinking about communication? How do we, so that it doesn't become this surprise thing?
I know a district on the coast where teachers seem very unhappy, and a friend of mine asked them why, and they said, because we're the ones in the classroom and they never come to us first. I think the faster the better. You at least get the idea out there and ask them what they think of that and say you did it based, as you just said, on what we thought you wanted. But we want to make sure that's true, because it really doesn't matter how good an idea it is. If they think it's imposed and it's coming top down, there can be objections to the best thing in the world.
Yeah, I agree with you, Diane. And again, remember, year 2 really is teachers involved in the whole year 2 process, right? We can't design without them. Year 1 is the big picture stuff, the big pictures. What are the big barriers to shifting things like the budget and the contracts and all those sorts of things. And then year 2 is like really not just principals sitting in a room with us, but like teachers. So the way I relate to it is, a few years ago, we had something called a guiding coalition, 21 people, all roles represented, every building represented, here in this room, routinely meeting about the work of trying to shift our system to include students more. Instead of sending students out of the classroom all the time, making sure they had their core instruction, which we have learned under research says core instruction plus the intervention strategy is where students get the most gains in their learning. But what we were doing is stripping them of core instruction and sending them out for specialty instruction. And so then we stagnated, right? And so 21 people, including ed techs and teachers association and teachers and admin and specialists all coming into this room and really learning and reading and making decisions together allowed us to make this shift to have it be a natural next step instead of this scary one. And we're still making little shifts. Like at the middle school, we just changed some things this year, little micro things, because teachers are like, this is the barrier that's been created. And, they're seeing it and we're like, oh, well, that can actually be fixed. Let's work to fix it together.
Internal communication.
Yeah, also.
Angela, the other thing I think of is these folks my head always goes to project management, sort of my life. So they probably have a communication plan and a strategy. And I think what Diane, Jeff, and others are saying is the sooner we get everyone, all the stakeholders involved and, buying into that, I agree. I'm sure they also have like a incentive to why you're part of this plan and we'd like you to stay for 2 years to see this through for all the reasons. And there might be an incentive for you, whatever that is, like, these people are educators for a reason. And so that's the kind of stuff they do. Like if we lead it up with that, right, it feels like, oh, this is really good stuff. I want to make a difference and do this, right? And so I hope we always have a good group, like you just mentioned, of teachers that raise their hand too, but maybe we find those ones that we know are good, that we can be like, you're pretty amazing and you'd be great at this, right? And
Yeah.
so we don't miss any of those people,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want people who also doubt it a little bit.
Totally.
Because they're the
Yeah.
ones that, let's be real, that's how
healthy debate and
that's how you design something
Totally.
that's really,
I agree.
really impactful.
Yep.
And that I like the coach system, whatever. And Jeff has never seen that when they come in. I didn't know what coaches were, and they're really great. And we already know that the teachers really, the demand for them is so great. And so I don't know how they could be brought into it in the best way might also ease their minds, since they're people they're familiar with that they like a lot and they don't feel, intimidated.
Right.
It was by all means the best thing to say these people are not here to evaluate you. in any way.
Right, absolutely.
And it took time to build that trust,
Yeah.
I think, right?
Yeah,
My understanding, right?
Yeah.
It was
it's faster now.
that internal
they're-
communication.
That we're there, yeah,
um,
I agree.
But it takes a minute. And fully, I would really tend to want to support, the knowledge base and skills and abilities that we have. you know, in the district and with the, you know, the talent pool we have to draw from, like, if there's a way to, it's sort of activating that long-term knowledge, that institutional knowledge, but
Correct,
it
yeah.
makes it
Experience.
active in the
And now we're writing it down
Moment.
and using it, and
Yeah.
that person feels empowered about it too, which is something they just do now, right? 'Cause-
And some of our staff, like, they love the idea of being a coach, but they actually don't wanna work across all the buildings. Like, they know their building, they know their community really, really well. They wanna make that difference in that one
In there,
building where they
right.
are most comfortable also. This is something that could actually do that, right? So it's kind of,
Right.
you know, not everyone manages 3 buildings easily. No,
Sure.
almost no one. I mean,
Yeah,
our
it's
coaches
hard.
are pretty exceptional, but
Yeah,
to get to know one community and have that leadership and impact and still remain connected to the students deeply is, I think, really powerful. We have a lot to learn. There are some talking points. I did not use these. I will probably learn about them more a little and become more fluent in this. But I do appreciate you taking a moment to entertain this and really think, like, what are some flags, which I've noted? You know, what are some opportunities for us? And I also wanted to be just really clear, this is intended to be budget neutral. You know, this is intended to allow us, if for some reason we move into one United Elementary School instead of 4 community schools, it can work. If we remain 4 community schools, it can work, right? That's actually built into the design process so that whatever the community decides is, we can still move forward with, you know, shifting our thinking around student supports and leadership.
one thing I just thought of, which might be helpful, because I do this all the time too, I kind of get into the weeds and now we all understand why. But is it good, will the board get like another high level flyby of why and maybe
Yes.
attach this?
Yep.
Just like, and this is why us and 6 other schools are doing this and why we feel it's important and so forth. Because I think sometimes when we're in committee, we all know why, right? But the public and other folks might not get it. They're like, oh, like you said, it's another thing we're asking. No, actually, it's gonna be part of the strategic plan and useful and, right, building on what we've started. So, yeah.
Will do, and I know Pat has already put that out there for one of the future meetings. I'm just not, I haven't,
Yeah,
hopefully it's not this Thursday.
yeah, right? You have one
I
day,
didn't
no.
see that.
I'm hoping it's November.
Yeah, hopefully November.
Thanks for I think it sounds good to me. I just,
It's interesting, right? I mean, I never had a 2-year design process, so I
No.
think that's also really something I'm kind of looking forward to, is not feeling like we have to race through anything.
Totally.
It is 4:30. I do want to adjourn. And we will be meeting the second Tuesday of November. I think it's also after a long weekend, but I could be
Oh,
wrong.
and
I
but it's
think
a
so,
Friday,
too.
right? It's a Friday then.
November 14th. Oh, no, it's
That's Friday.
it's the Monday is a regular day.
Okay.
So Tuesday, November 14th
Yep.
is the second Tuesday. So that's when we'll meet again. Alyssa and I will work on getting an agenda out to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you happen to have another one of those handouts, Angela?